Welcome to Lumient Live. I'm your host, Mark Ackroyd. Lumient Live is the podcast for advice professionals that believe in a values-based advice experience, but still have that question, how does it all work? We connect listeners with other advice professionals to hear best practice client stories or business examples and lift the lid on how they made it happen. Now, on to today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Lumient Live. Today, I'm super excited to have on the podcast with me, Alli Jordan, President and COO of LibertyFi. G'day, Alli. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, I'm so excited to be on.
Hey, how good's this? So for those of you that don't know, Alli and LibertyFi are part of our partners network. We're really excited to be working with them, and it just made sense to get Alli on, given the work that they do, which is so significant for their advisor base, because we know that some of the stuff we'll speak about today and what Alli's really passionate about will resonate with a ton of our audience. So with that, Alli, how about we start with you and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into a bit about LibertyFi and have the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, so Alli Jordan, we're down here in Birmingham, Alabama, and we've been in this space for a little over 10 years now, which it kind of all, flies by. But LibertyFi was really created to be to think of us as an outsourced middle office for RIAs looking to grow and scale their businesses. So there's been a huge movement into the RIA space over the past 10 years of entrepreneurial mindsets, advisors wanting to build value for themselves and their clients and their families. And when they do so, they kind of tend to forget about all of the other nuances that go into, wait, how do I run this business? I have to do billing. I have to think about trading. I want to have operational staff that can leverage technology. How do I get them trained and adapting what I've really invested in? And so that was how LibertyFi was created 6 years ago, with the mindset of we can really go in and partner with firms so they can leverage the technology that they're utilizing, our expertise of really understanding their businesses, their wants, their needs, their aspirations, so they can focus on what they're really good at, which is client relationships and growing. So yeah, that's LibertyFi.
It's such a great business model and business purpose, in particular, obviously with the RIA space, right? Because they clearly have joined that space and open up their practices to get that benefit for their life and their clients and their families at home. That helping them do what they do best helps them keep living that purpose of why they did it in the first place. So I love the way that you work with them, and probably makes sense for everyone why we're key partners here with LibertyFi, because of your focus on helping them do the really deep and meaningful client stuff, right?
It's so right. As soon as I heard the Lumient story, I was like, okay, this there's a lot of alignment here. It's in a different part of the segmentation of the business and the world and what we're all, how we're supporting advisors, but there's so much synergy in the values that you all are seeing, and what kind of, again, giving advisors more tools to have that deeper relationship. What we are trying to always do is allow the advisors to do what they do best. And I think you guys do such a good job of providing them, something deeper, to have those deeper conversations, to make that relationship stickier with their end client, because it's a competitive world out there. And so how can you make sure those clients that you're serving really see the value in what you're providing them? And we're trying to do the same thing with the advisors that we work with.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think so. Today's episode, we're going to cover a wide gamut of things. But the fact is, you work with a ton of great firms and you see a ton of great things. So working with you and talking with you today, we'll unpack some of the industry observations you're having around the next generations of advisors and talent, and then also obviously some of your core work around where you see operational efficiencies and how best you support them, or how best you think advisors are setting up to make use of those operational efficiencies. But it wouldn't be a Lumient Live episode if we didn't start this with a bit of a client story. And Alli, you've brought one in that's close to home as to sort of the power behind everything that we speak about. You want to maybe tell us a little bit about your story, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, it was so interesting. We were having a call with your team at Lumient, and they were talking about, the slow go years and the go years and the no go years. And it kind of resonated with me of like, yeah, I understand that and what that means and why that's important to an advisor and for them to speak like that to their clients. And Lumien's premise of, it's not just about kind of the financial partner, it's about both partners and their values together. And so I happened to be that week talking to my parents, and they had just left their meeting with their financial advisor. They're 65, so they're kind of trying to decide, what the next 10 years look like for them. And my mom started telling me, yeah, they showed us, the next 10 years are our go-go years. And that just really resonated with me. Like, we got to go, because then it's slow goes and then it's no-go. And we worked so hard to do, to have, something to be able to have some go-go years. And it clicked with me that my mom has never been, she's in the conversation, but she's not. My dad is the one that meets with the accountants and typically goes to the meetings and knows kind of all of their financial orders. And my mom's sitting in that meeting and the advisor telling her, like, the next 10 years, you're in a position to do things. This is when you want to do it, while you're still healthy, you're young, you have grandkids, go. And she was like, yes. And I feel, financially we can do some of these things, and we have our values of what we want to do and where we want to go. And I just thought that was so powerful that she, kind of in the non-financial seat, now understands that the next 10 years they should have some fun because they've worked really hard to do so. And I just thought it was so funny that I was talking to your team just that week about that exactly. And so I think advisors that aren't taking advantage of kind of that terminology or that simplicity of what that means to their clients are missing something. And so I think, again, what you all are kind of out there preaching is a different way for an advisor to have that conversation. My mom, if they would have showed her Monte Carlo of, this is exactly, these are your 1,000 scenarios and you're going to be good in 93% of the time. If you do this, if you spend that, she would have, it would go right over her head. She's like, oh, okay, that doesn't mean much to me, but wait, you have 10 years of go-go years and you can spend this amount in those go-go years to check off some of the bucket list, because that spend is going to drastically slow down. Just immediately resonated with her. So I thought that was super cool.
I love it. The timing can be better.
Yeah.
The concept of, those first 10 years after retirement, making sure you have a plan, a financial plan is part of it, but have a plan to spend them active, doing the things that you want to do, because, the unfortunate thing is that life slows down after that. And whilst it slows down, healthcare costs go up. So it's a bit of a perfect storm.
Yep.
In America, I'm learning. So, I think it's a really cool example. Alli, if I could ask you maybe a couple questions about your observations of your mum there.
Yeah.
You obviously had a long relationship with your mum, and you've been in the industry for a while. Have you ever seen that level of excitement from her around, her life plan or financial plan before?
Never. And I say that, like, they've been small business owners. They're, for a lot of their lives. So they've always kind of had they've known kind of where they are and what they need to do. And my dad's been a very big, like, no debt person. And, that's just kind of like how he plays, and very kind of conscious of what they spend and how they spend it. And so my mom, to kind of get the green light of, like, to your point, these are things that they want to do, go do it, was just a sigh of, like, a sense of just like, yes, let's do it. Which I just think is, I was really excited for them. And the other thing that I thought was important, a part of that conversation, what you touched on, is the healthcare costs. And so they understood, this is what it's going to cost now. This is what it could cost. These are kind of your, if something were to happen, and that was all a part of that go the next 10 years, right? And why they can spend what they can spend over the next 10 years. And so, because that can change the conversation if something happens or whatever that looks like. So I think having kind of a balance of the advisor being in that seat to be able to give them the tools to understand what they can do, is just huge. But to your point, never has she been as excited. And I was excited for them. I'm sitting on the sideline, watching and building my life and my relationships with, my kids. And I told him, I was like, let's book that Disney trip.
Yeah, cash in now. How many years you got, Mum? Great, let's do it. That's so good. I mean, for those that are watching on the YouTube channel will see your face light up, but I think people listening in the podcast channels will hear it in your voice. I think the impact of getting that financial freedom, which comes from almost permission sometimes, is so liberating, not only for the financial spouse, the non-financial spouse, in this instance your mum, but also for the surrounding family members like yourself. Like, to your point, it now means that you can push a whole of family Disney trip, right?
Yeah.
How good's that?
Yeah.
Well, we've got permission to do what now? Spend. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Great.
okay, let's do it. Within boundaries, right? But they know what those boundaries are, which is awesome.
Yeah. Hey, that's so cool. I love that story. I think it gives us really good sort of frame for the rest of our chat, because one of the things you touched on is that, your mum in this scenario would have over time been exposed to traditional experiences like investments, portfolio planning, Sharpe ratios, all of that sort of jazz, which aren't unimportant, but we're sort of arguing that there's more important things to a client. And in this instance, it was around, life planning, understanding what they want to do, and giving them permission to go and spend. So we do acknowledge, and certainly from a Lumiant perspective, that financial advice is changing, or financial planning is changing, and propositions and experiences need to change with it. You get the privileged position in your role to see those shifts and trends. And one of the ones I know we spoke about prior to the podcast was how you're seeing a shift in trends of the next generation of advisors, and the work that they want to do, and how firms are starting to leverage that next generation, or think about that next generation. Do you want to maybe speak about that a little bit and some of your observations?
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges in our space is we have great advisors that have been doing this for 30, 40 years, right? So they're used to the way that they have conversations with clients. They've always delivered a great outcome to their clients. They have deep relationships with their clients, but it hasn't gone kind of below surface level, right? It's always been on, here's the money that we've invested. This is how it's doing. We're on track to hit a retirement goal, which is awesome, which is great. That's fantastic. But I think the next generation is changing the way that we think about how we think about the world and the services that we expect for costs that we're paying, or what, it's an evolution of technology and resources and access. I mean, you can go to TikTok or Twitter and you can get advice now. You can say, okay, I'm going to do it myself. And we all know as financial professionals, like, that typically isn't going to work out for you in the long run. But I just think there's so much out there that's kind of changing the landscape. And so what we've really seen is that next generation of advisor also start to really understand, okay, I need to do more for my clients, whether that's deepening the conversation with them, talking to not making sure the non-financial spouse is involved, expanding my service set, right? So not just being focused on investments, thinking about, okay, how can I provide their insurance needs? They're a business owner, they need E&O, everything around you being kind of the quarterback of their wellness journey is more so of what we're seeing, right? And I think, as we've all talked about, Lumiant giving additional tools to kind of have that deeper relationship. So I don't want to say I'm the older generation of advisors won't catch on, because I think they'll have to, if they want to continue to be in the business for the next 10 to 15 years, they'll have to change some of the way that they have been doing things by, positioning things a little differently. We're going to have to service more clients. We're going to have to do more for our fees that we're getting, that we're charging. And so having those deeper relationships is going to be important. But I do think one thing we are seeing is that next generation of advisor, which is, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit too, like, there isn't a lot of next generation advisors, so that's a whole nother problem. But the ones that are in the space understand and know they've got to do more than just focus on the investment in the portfolio to service their clients and the next generation of clients.
Yeah, there's certainly two paths that I think we could unpack here, which is that next generation. Like, where do you find them? How do you recruit them? What's your best recruiting strategy? I know you've got opinions on that. So maybe let's start there. And I think I want to come back to the comment around the older generation of advisors, because they're still looking to grow, and they might do that through hiring next gen advisors or finding operational efficiencies. So I'd love to come back to that. But let's start with next gen. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, tell me a little bit about what you're saying around where do we find them? How do we recruit them? How do we develop them? Do we need to think a little bit differently?
Yeah, I have, I have strong opinions on most things, but this is another one I have opinions on, and
I
and
love
it
it.
it kind of reflects back to our business a little bit, and that's okay. But I think we talk to advisors all the time and people in our space, and they're having huge challenges getting talent, training talent, and then retaining talent because the compensation model is crazy these days. People kind of hop to kind of the next best thing. And so one of the things that we've seen advisors be super successful on is being able to incorporate technology to do some of the more mundane operational tasks of their business and hiring people that kind of have the EQ to have those deeper conversations. It becomes more of relationships than needing to be operationally savvy because sometimes those two don't collide. Sometimes they do, but what we're really trying to give the firms that we work with and when I'm talking to other industry peers is how can we make sure people know that there's technology out there to do a lot of your operational needs and what we want to hire for and grow talent on is the relationship side. So if we can have a firm that we work with that if they're hiring relationships, they're hiring people because you can train, you can teach that. They have kind of that embedded natural instinct in there to, you know, dig deeper in the EQ, understand kind of what are your core values, but it's hard to teach them, how to do billing or recon or investments. Those are skill sets that aren't easy to come by and they're not easy to teach, and they typically are, job hopping around. So kind of changing that landscape for the next generation. You don't have to have someone that has 10 years in the financial services background or financial services industry. You can have different backgrounds and bring them into our space. I almost think it's going to be better because the conversation is changing from what we're seeing.
Yeah, I love the way you're thinking about it there. I think what resonates with me is, before we just hop straight into a typically traditional recruiting strategy, I need someone with, CFP skills or commerce or whatever those old school type of skills we traditionally used to be attracted to starting to think, well, what's the capability set that I can't outsource or that I can't get done or that I actually need? And the
Yep.
capability set that I think I value most could potentially be here the EQ side, the relationship building side, because quite frankly, in particular, working with firms like yourself, we can scale the operational efficiency outside of this skill set. What I can't scale when I'm thinking about growth is the actual client engagement.
Yes, that's like what I preach that and we try to provide that to the teams that we work with all the time is how can we help you not have to hire internally but hire externally facing individuals. And again, I think there's different skill sets and needs and resumes that you can look at when that's what you're looking to hire.
Yeah, I love that. I used to work in a previous life with a great advice manager or advice leader who had a theory that I really enjoyed. I think resonates with this. And she was sort of saying to me, why couldn't we find the next generation of female advisors within that set of high school leavers or college leavers that, wanted to get into nursing or patient care because they think that's the best path for them when their core purpose is helping people. Well, financial planners help people,
Yeah.
and the same EQ they need to understand patient care is the EQ that I think we need for great long-term relationships. And I'm like, sort of hard to argue that. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, we need
Good
to.
point.
You're right. It's a great
Right.
point. I think when we think about a diverse workforce, we've got to think about where we get that talent from. So yeah, I don't know. I think we got to think differently. I love your point. We can teach some of the technical stuff. We can certainly teach and outsource the operational stuff. Can't teach EQ.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I love that. So look, if we can come back then to, the older generation, I think, it's certainly not a slide on age. I think it's just a term we use to say, well, it's certainly not the next generation, right? It's everyone else. You're still seeing them in particular be successful in the RIA space, thinking differently around evolving their offerings and bringing on new people, whether it be that next gen advisor, because they've still got high growth plans, right? So
yep.
One of the challenges you continuously talk about and think through for advisors is how do they support more and more clients, right? So how do you think through that, or what are your observations on that from your perspective or LibertyFi's perspective?
Yeah, and it's another thing that we talk about, because these advisors, and you're right, it's not age, it's just they've been in the business 30 years, right? So they have ways of doing things, and we are seeing them incorporating new services into their practice, because they know, to have that stickier relationship with that client, I need to do more. And what does that look like? And we always talk about, the $1 trillion, movement of assets over the next 10 years, the transfer of wealth. And there's going to be a lot of clients that how do you do what you're doing, continue to provide a higher level of service, and be able to support more. And so that's kind of that's the game. Like, whoever can figure that out and figure that out from a business model perspective is going to be super successful, right, over the next 10 years. I think other people will be fine, but you have a big opportunity to capture kind of some of that movement. And so, again, back to what we are always preaching, it's like the advisor, investment management can be a now commoditized thing. No one cares what performance reporting system, client cares what performance reporting system you're on. No client cares that you have the next shiny thing in the space. And so really getting back down to the basics of how can I make sure my clients are having a good outcome experience from the investment side, but I can do this at more scale, right? How can we accomplish that? And I think if we think about it just from the ops side of things, again, you're outsourcing your billing, outsourcing your trading, you're outsourcing your CFO functions, you're outsourcing your compliance, you're outsourcing the things that don't drive your revenue, right? And what's driving your revenue is your clients, and being able to provide them more to get their outcomes is what you need to do. And so that's just and we see it in the firms we work with. They all, they're growing, they're adding more clients, they're able to do a lot more, they're having deeper conversations, because their mindset is on what's important to my firm to be able to get to that next level, to be able to do more for more clients.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me to something you often speak about, which is, and correct me if I get this phrase wrong, but growing leverage, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I also look at it, so you're leveraging what you have, and you're a business owner at the end of the day too. And so you've made investments in certain areas of your firm to be able to do the things that you want to accomplish. And so a big thing that I like to see, and I try to make sure the firms that we work with are doing, and anyone out there, is make sure the investment that you've made in either the technology or the resources or the people, you're getting the most out of. And the way that you do that is either leveraging a team like mine, or, the outsourced compliance officer you're working with, or whoever it might be, but you have made an investment in that component of your business. And so make sure you're getting out of it what you want. And I think a lot of times advisors are busy. They're trying to service all of those clients. They're trying to grow their business. And so they stay surface level with a lot of the things that they have. And then they're like, oh, I need to go to the next thing because it's not giving me what I want. It's like, no, you already have that. You just haven't been able to kind of go deep enough into it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it's a conversation we have internally here at Lumion quite a bit, right? Just to lift the veil on what it's like to work in a tech company. It's not all it's not all code and sunshine and rainbows, but we speak about the same thing, right? Because and here's a really simple example. Have you ever watched someone that's really good at Excel or really good at PowerPoint whiz around a spreadsheet or design a PowerPoint slide? Oh, that's heaps better than the word art I used or the simple sum function that I'm doing 15 times.
Yep.
Yet we both have those tools, and we've had those tools for so long. And they sort of almost feel like commodities, but someone that's really good at them gets so much more out of them. So one of the things that we do internally is, a few of us have this be great at what we've got meeting to be like, hey, does anyone know how to use this really well? And I'm adamant that
be great at what we got. I'm writing that down. Like, that is such a good motto.
It's to your point, right? Like, and we sort of fall into this at Lumient quite a bit. Like, we get exposed to all this great tech. You're like, I need that. And all of a sudden you're just laddering this Frankenstein of a tech stack. And you're like, hey, did anyone know that PowerPoint would do that? Nah, no, I didn't know it. And I'm starting to get
Gosh, it's so true. And advisors, I love them. Their advisors are my business. I'm in this space because I love working with them, right? And they are the worst at the shiny object. And I won't say I'm not bad at it either, but it's like, oh, gotta have it. I'm like, you already have it. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I don't know. This is me nerding out, so apologies to the audience, but like, I'm getting lost. I'm getting lost in like social media reels and TikToks of like PowerPoint decks, right? I mean, that probably speaks a lot to my character, but I'm like watching people go, you made it look like what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is the point. You can just, with a little bit of dedicated time or speaking to the right people, you can get so much more out of what's already within your tech stack or within your process that then helps you grow more leverage, right?
I think it's so true. I listened to someone a couple years back, and she said it was some, a conversation like this on a podcast, and it was talking about leveraging your technology and not putting the Frankenstein, together. And her advice was, do a demo annually of what you have, right? Because there's new things, they'll show kind of different things than when you onboarded 3 years ago and that you forgot about that they showed you initially. And I was like, that's a wonderful way to think about it. Like, just kind of do a demo, dive deeper and see if there's something new you can learn. It's worth the hour of your time.
I love that tip, right? I was going to ask you, and maybe you've got a couple more up your sleeve here, but some of the things that you do, that LibertyFi does with their new practices or their existing practices to identify where they could get more leverage. Do you have practices or exercises that you do to work people through and go, hey, you could outsource that or get that done a little bit better?
Yes. And so a big part of what we do, and it's a little different, is most of the time when we're onboarding or working with a firm, they're in motion. So they're coming into the space for the first time. And that's a very overwhelming 60 days. And so we try to take on all of the heavy lifting from the ops side of, again, I see this a lot, the billing, the model management, all of the components of their portfolio accounting system during those 60 days. So they can focus on the clients moving their business, because that's what's important. If you're making this leap, the clients need to come with you. So really try to have them leverage us during that time. And then from there, we learn after those 60 days, they've moved their books. We dive deeper into, okay, what's important to your business? We start our training then. So they're using real life data, examples of how to use the system, and our adoption and is just so much higher of the system, because it's not a 6-week training plan that you're doing before you break and then kind of some drips from there. It's really, we try to be engaging when you're in the system. So I think that's been huge for our firms that we work with. And then this is kind of simple, but it's a unique tool. It's a co-browsing function. So whenever they do call us, it's built into the technology, and they're able to, we can take over their screen automatically without having to set up a Zoom or anything. And I think just that little piece of training where they're clicking versus us clicking is huge for learning and see, use cases of, oh wait, if you click here, it's 1 less click than 4 clicks that you were doing, right? Because 4 clicks a day is, 10 times a day, and it becomes, if you can do it with 1 instead of 4, that's a time saver, right? Which is what we're always trying to do. So those are kind of 2 little things that for us, and I think everyone with technology, on the training side and the engagement side is using your data and your, firm and your clients is always going to be so much more power from an adoption perspective. And I also think sometimes we try to, hold hands and do the, fishing for the advisor. And it's like, no, teach them to fish. Like that's a big thing for us is, yes, we could do it and it would be faster and maybe the advisor would be a little happier. But if we teach them to fish, it's going to be so much better off for them in the long run, versus us doing it for them. So
I love that, Alli. It sort of goes to that idea you shared before from the podcast you listened to around the demo, right? It's rather than let me just fix it, why don't you show me what you're doing,
yep.
right? Show me how you're using it, and we're going to do this together, so that 1, you learn, but 2, I actually see what you're actually doing. And it comes up in a lot of what we talk about internally. What people say they do and what they actually do are 2 vastly different things sometimes,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And until you actually explain your process and then have to show your process, the micro clicks, I like to call it, right? The stuff that
Yep.
oh yeah, we just moved from this screen to this screen. You're like, yeah, but you took 4 clicks to get there. Why did you have to go through that path? Like, is that part of the process? Should it be part of the process? Like, all of those things add up and form part of a macro system that is your operations, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Huge. I love that, Alli. I think what you guys are doing at LibertyFi and how you're thinking about those operational efficiencies and growing leverage is so important to our industry. I think you've given us a ton of top tips today. What we'd love to do, like we do with all our industry experts, Alli, is get you to share a little bit about yourself now.
All right.
By working through our values exercise, Alli. So what I've got up here for those listening is our 16 value statements. We do this with all our industry experts, and I'm going to get Alli to choose your top values card and tell us why that's the most important to you.
It's you read all these and you're like, you feel guilty not saying one of them, right? It's like, oh, I need to say that. I need to say that. Because there's a lot of them on here that are important, or they're all important, but there's a lot that kind of immediately come to mind. But as a new, or not, I'm not a new mom anymore, but I still kind of consider it new. I have a 1 and a 3-year-old girl, and I talked about my parents at the beginning and my husband, and I think the one that stands out to me the most is support and protect those that I love. I think that's just, if you can be in a position to do that, and that's an incredible feeling and goal for me long term to, again, be in a position one day where they don't have to worry about me getting older, or my parents, if they are getting older, they, feel supported by us. And, being able to leave something for my girls one day is and them to be able to have a grow up in an environment where they feel supported and protected financially, and not something that they have to necessarily worry about as they figure out the world that we all live in, which can be a crazy place at times. So I think out of all of these, there's a lot of really good ones that I would pick, but that one stands out, especially in my newer role as a mom, for me. So,
Alli, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really cool example of how people think about the people around them, right? And advisors will hear that and want to talk about intergenerational opportunities and stuff like
yeah.
that. But if we just sit silent for a little bit, it just speaks to the care that you have for those around you and why that's so important. The one comment I will make is if your daughters do figure out this world, just let us know.
Yeah, my goodness.
Because I still got no idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one, but it gives us, it's here and we're here for it, right?
Yeah, totally.
We're gonna make it a better place, right?
Absolutely.
That's what we're all doing. So, and I think one thing that to finish, to wrap up what you said earlier about at the end of the day, that's what we all get to do, is help people, right? And the advisors are the ones helping the end clients. And I think I admire what they do and what they do for people, and watching that on a daily basis. And but I think all of us kind of supporting and surrounding them, we're a part of that. And so I think we are talking about making the world a better place. Like, that's kind of what we're all doing. So more power to all of us to remember that sometimes, that we do have some of that control to try and make the world a better place. So.
Well, what a great note to end on. I don't want to take too much away from that, Alli. I think your time has been extremely valuable to us in our audience, talking about how people can sort of think about growing leverage through operational efficiencies to spend more time with their clients, and most importantly, harness their growth plans through the next generation of advisors coming through. Alli, on behalf of the Lumient Live audience, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for hanging out with us. It's been
Yes, Mark, this is awesome.
It's so much fun. Well, thank you so much, and look, have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk soon. Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lumient Live. If you really enjoyed it, we'd love if you could hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast provider so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes. Thanks again for tuning in.